Crystal. My name is Joan Landis. I'm a master's level clinical mental health therapist licensed by the state to do psychotherapy with all ages of clients from 0 to 90 or 100. And I deal a lot with adolescents, especially. And interestingly, as I saw the YouTube video where the particular reading and language arts materials were featured, I had some very interesting concerns from a mental health point of view about the risks and the dangers that this type of approach would put students in, and that actually that this type of approach that was delineated in these books could seriously set the mental health profession and mental health resilience of children back about 50 years, because the concepts that they advocate in these materials are directly, diametrically opposed to research that has come out for the last 50 years, since about 1960. And so for me to see that this egregious violation of up-to-date research is very, very concerning for me. One of the things that this particular language arts book did was they continually engaged children on a very emotional level. Not only emotional level, but negative emotional level.
Joan, just for people that maybe haven't seen the video, I'll put a link up to the particular video that Joan is referencing. But the book that Joan is referencing was geared towards, I believe it was first graders. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it was a writing book. Is that accurate?
It was basically a language art, so it was learning to use words.
Okay.
And the point of the book was to learn to use words that have high emotional impact in order to better manipulate the listener. Now, you know, just not only addressing the fact that that type of language manipulation is probably not appropriate for a first grader. The idea that this book reinforces repeatedly is to choose the emotional word that will get the biggest reaction. Well, the biggest reaction that people will normally get is to negative words. Words that create anger, that create competition, that create jealousy, that create resentment. Those are the words that they are advocating that these students use. And very interestingly, they give exercises in the books where they offer the children two choices of words. And they say that the word that is the correct choice is the emotionally elevated word, which is most often negative. Okay, so from a mental health point of view, what's the problem with this? The problem is that children, especially in first grade, their cognitive reasoning abilities, the development of their neocortex is not finished yet. In fact, it really will not be finished till about age 24. What is finished, for the most part, is their limbic system. Okay, the limbic system is the primitive part of all of our brains. It's the part that engages and takes over when we feel threatened, when we feel angry, when we feel traumatized, when we feel horror, when we feel shame. All of these negative emotions are processed mainly in the limbic system. And so what we should be doing for children age, the primary grades, is not training them to engage in the limbic system emotional reactivity, which is exactly what these books do. They channel, they funnel, they train these children to think in terms of emotions that are seated in the limbic system, the primitive parts of our brains. The problem with that is that if we as humans spend most of our time in that type of primitive thinking, and what it really is reacting. It's emotional reacting, okay? The limbic system doesn't think. The limbic system is fight or flight. Okay, there's no cognitive thinking there. And so, so what happens is that if a person lives there, if that's where they are most of the time in their day, then they are very emotionally reactive. The problem with being emotionally reactive is that you're then very emotionally manipulated very easily. All someone has to do is trigger your fear, trigger your anger, trigger your resentment, and you react because there's very little thought process there. My great concern with this curriculum is they are teaching children not only to engage in the emotional thinking and the emotional reactivity, but they're negative. Okay, if you look at it, they were very, very heavy on the anger and resentment. Okay, I'm sure there must be examples in the book that have to do with joy and rejoicing. I didn't see them. And so the great concern is not only are we coaching these children to be easily manipulated, but these are some of the great risk factors for future emotional challenges. Because me as a therapist, I spend 90% of my time training people to get out of that emotional reactivity, to get out of that limbic system processing into the neocortex, into the frontal lobes, into the logic, into the thinking and consideration. And if someone as a child has been trained repeatedly and consistently to stay in the emotionally reactive part of their brain, then you are setting them up for mental health problems in the future. And
they asked me to give a presentation on whether or not I thought the Common Core standards were developmentally appropriate. Talk is going to be sort of at the other end of the spectrum, looking at the entering grades and trying to see if the standards look okay for them. Why? Why would we even care if they're developmentally appropriate? Well, you can answer that with one word, and that word is stress. Kids that are subjected to standards that aren't appropriate will be more stressed, and this is actually shown to be true in research. So this is just one of the research studies that has been done, but they just looked at kindergartners in a classroom, compared them in a developmentally appropriate classroom and one that wasn't, and the kids in the one that wasn't were in there biting their nails and twirling their hair and doing some of these other things, tremors and tics and looking nervous. And I like this one about having physical aches and pains, because as a psychologist I can tell you that's the first sign of anxiety when your kids are little. So this is why it's important to really think about this. So to do this, I have to sort of give you a crash course in child development, but basically in a nutshell it means that we don't think that kids' brains are the same as adults' brains. They're different, they're still developing, and they keep developing from the time they're born until they're adults and even onwards. So we generally do a pretty good job of this when our kids are babies and toddlers. You know, if a child hits its mom's mouth while they're holding the infant, we don't arrest that infant for assault, right? We all know, didn't mean to do that. So we do a good job. But once they start talking and start reasoning, we sort of stop doing that. And we generally think, well, if you're nice to them and you don't shame them, then you're being developmentally appropriate. But that's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is really understanding how their mind is developing and then matching how you are presenting information to them based on that. So I was going to do a little example about a typical exchange between a kindergartner teacher and a kindergartner. You might see, you know, little Jimmy goes over and scribbles on Susie's paper, and she runs off and she cries, and the teacher pulls him aside and very nicely says, you know, what do you think Susie was feeling when you did that? Or what would you think if she came over and did that to you? And it would look, you know, like she's being nice in typical kindergarten fashion. I'll give you another little brief class in child development. So Piaget, most people have sort of heard of him if you took psychology. I'm going to skip his periods that aren't school age and go right to the pre-operational phase, which is 2 to 7 years of age. So this includes kindergartners, first graders, 5, 6, 7 years of age. He divided development into periods. This one's called pre-operational. It's kind of just what it sounds like, that they are cognitively really focused on how things look. So when you show them 2 cookies plus 3 cookies equal 5 cookies, and you have this demonstration here, they're going to kind of look at the 2 and the 3 and think that looks different than the 5 that are all together, and they're going to really struggle to understand that. But if you wait just a little bit longer, you're going to be in this concrete operational period where that is like fabulous for them. Practicing math facts is right up their alley. They love to do concrete operations. What distinguishes this from the next one, called formal operational period, is that they can't yet think abstractly. They are beginning it towards the end of the concrete period, but they're really not able to think abstractly until the formal operational period, which is 11 to 12.
Have the child who makes the query and the learning nugget comes down, and they have to meet particular outcomes, and you have all these outside resources that will be validated to meet the outcome. Now, this is very important because you know what? Parents are thinking about computers for word processing, aren't they? I love computers. Saves us tons of time, can cross-reference our information, bring up files, do cost accounting. I mean, they're just great, right? Who's going to validate the curriculum to be sure your child meets the outcome? Are you looking at software, guys? Let's do a values clarification on computer. I think it's fun. Okay, child sits down into the computer, pops in. Now he's going to do a decision making. Decision making comes up. Now let's do the lifeboat, for instance. Okay, here we have the situation. The child's on the computer, and it gives you all the different people that are in the lifeboat, and the child now has to select which one gets the life preservers and which one has to be thrown out. Now, something very interesting about computers. Computers are neutral. They are programmed to do their job. Now, you can program values clarification in 2 ways. And this is how I really got involved, pretty much in this thing, because I thought, gee, this is a very unnatural process, okay? Because you can teach positive or you can teach negative. If you teach positive, the child will learn the positive. If you teach the negative, the child will learn the negative. So if I were teaching that situation, I would teach the positive. How are we going to save everybody? Okay, let's come up with as many ideas as we can to decide how we're going to save everyone in the lifeboat. And we're going to turn over the boat, and when each one can carry the baby for a while, and we're going to take turns. And kids are great, right? Creative. You focus them in the direction, and their minds are like computers, and that's the way that they will go. And they will come up with more ideas of how to save everyone in that boat than you can imagine. You teach the positive, they will learn the positive. All right, let's teach the negative. Who are you going to throw out? You're going to throw out mom, you're going to throw out dad, you're going to throw out baby, you're going to throw out grandma. You teach the negative, you learn the negative. All right, now we're on computer. Will the computer program be programmed positive or negative? Whether it is linear or whether it is menu-driven, where the child may seem to be able to select, it always meets the same outcome. It doesn't matter. Computers are neutral. They are programmed to do their job. Understand that technology is a tool to meet the goal. Don't be afraid of technology. Be afraid of who's validating the curriculum and the software.